Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we have a bit of an in-depth all-numbers analysis of NVIDIA's GTX 1080 in DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. The purpose of this video is to try and guesstimate where the GTX 1060 will land performance-wise in DirectX 12 when compared to the RX 480. Alright, let's get started. Alright everyone, before we get started, I'd like to let you know that all of the benchmarks I'm going to be talking about today and their links are going to be in the description below. So just recently, some GTX 1060 benchmarks for Ashes of the Singularity have leaked. At first I wasn't sure of the credibility of this source, but if you look at all of this person's recent AOTS benchmarks, they have benched a lot of other cards, including the GTX 1070, Titan X, and 1080. So take it as you will. This person benched the GTX 1060 in AOTS and it performed well enough to match the RX 480 in both 1080p and 1440p as you see here. At 4K, the RX 480 pulls ahead barely at 32.7 FPS compared to the GTX 1060's 30.3 FPS. If this leak is true, then AMD could be in some serious trouble because, as we all know, this is an AMD optimized title. The GTX 1060 is supposed to give us GTX 980 performance, and we don't really know how well it'll perform in other DX12 titles, so we're going to compare some numbers real quick using the GTX 1080. Just as a note, all of these benchmarks will be from Guru3D and all relevant links will be linked in the description below. So the way this will work is I'm going to start with this example benchmark here. Shadow of Mordor is DirectX 11, the difference in FPS between the GTX 1080 and RX 480 is 19 FPS, which is an increase in performance of 82%. So then we'll take the division, and the difference in frames per second this time is 20, so the performance increase here is 83.3%. Next we'll use Far Cry Primal. The difference in FPS is 19, meaning an increase of 76%. Next is Anno 2205, and we get 48 minus 23 FPS. The difference is 25, meaning an increase of 108%. Lastly, we'll take GTA 5, where the difference in FPS is 28, which gives us an increase in FPS of 93%. If we average all of these numbers, then we know that the average performance increase in DX11 is 89% between the RX 480 and GTX 1080. Now we'll do the same for DX12 using Rise of the Tomb Raider, Hitman, Total War Warhammer, and Ashes of the Singularity. Then we'll find that in DirectX 12, the average performance increase that the GTX 1080 had is lowered to 71%. This means that the RX 480 performs better in DX12 than NVIDIA's Pascal GTX 1080. Now with this info, let's talk about the 1060 again. The 1060 has been set to perform as well as the 980 by NVIDIA themselves. If we look at Ashes of the Singularity at Quad HD, the 480 matches the GTX 980 just like we saw at the beginning with the leak. So we'll piece this together now. If the leaks are true, then the GTX 1060 does match the GTX 980's performance, but even in DirectX 12, which is a problem. We saw that the RX 480 gained 18% in performance relative to the GTX 1080 in DX12. So maybe Pascal isn't so hot in DirectX 12 after all. In the same titles that we saw earlier at 4K, the GTX 980 comes ahead by 5 FPS in Rise of the Tomb Raider, and even more at lower resolutions. In Hitman, the RX 480 smashes the GTX 980 at each res, and in Warhammer, the 480 inches ahead of the GTX 980 at 1080p and 2K, while the GTX 980 comes in first by 1 FPS at 4K. If the GTX 1060 actually holds true to the GTX 980 performance statement, then perhaps with proper drivers, the GTX 1060 will do well in DirectX 11 when compared to the RX 480. In DX12, however, The 1080 lost 18% of its lead to the RX 480. And with many major titles releasing in the next few years touting DX12 capabilities, your money may be better spent on an RX 480. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more content like this, then please subscribe and give us a like. But if you hate my math or something, give me a dislike, and please comment down below on what you'd like to see improved. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.